I personally believe that in order to move into the 21st century, that we must embrace technological change and shift away from the 19th century model of education, which, let's face it, most of our schools still very much reflect this model. If we think about it, our students are born digitally native. And I'm going to put a link up for a website by Mark Prensky, which gives a really good research report about what this actually means. However, I think this means that these children are born into a digital age where technology is readily available and readily usable for the majority of aspects of their life. I see it all the time. Children who can't even talk, they're crawling around, go up to their mothers, pick up their iPhones or their smartphones and start manipulating the screen. They know that they have to press the home button, they have to swipe the screen and touch the apps to get a response. Most kids are now beginning to learn the ABCs and 1, 2, 3s off the iPhone, smartphone and some sort of tablet. So they come to school with these experiences already, and we expect them to sit in front of a teacher with a delivery method, and we wonder why these kids are bored. I asked you in the previous lecture to have a think about your own educational philosophy or rationale, why you want to use the iPad in your classroom, and I think the why is a really important question to answer. I love this quote by Albert Einstein. It is a miracle that curiosity survives formal education. If we are to develop our students' sense of curiosity, we must be mindful to carve out time to allow our students to inquire and explore. It is really important to ask ourselves why. Why are we using iPads in schools in the first place? So if I think about my own situation, I was born in 1961 and the TV was a new technology and the telephone was only used when you had to. My parents considered using the telephone an expensive device that was indeed a luxury. My grandmother refused to use a new electronic mixer given to her as a gift because she believed that her cakes tasted better when they were hand mixed. My children have been born into an era where they can't even comprehend that I didn't have a colour TV when I was growing up, that we didn't even know what a DVD player was or a computer. They just can't even imagine that as a concept. They cannot remotely imagine not having a computer. They hold a computer in their iPhone, in their pocket, every day. And it would seem that every part of their life is digitalized. The phone has a camera, can connect to social media, can play games, record their lessons, send emails, texts. They can use Twitter and Facebook to memorialize every event of every day. I was always fascinated by technology, even as a little girl growing up in the 60s, when the idea that we could talk on the phone and see the person at the same time was just too fantastic to believe. That a phone could be carried with us everywhere we go was something for the imagination only. Or that we could use a computer that would be as small as the hand was incredibly titillating. My favourite program was The Jetsons, and I wished my world was like theirs. Now, 45 years or so on, I find I'm living that world, and I really find it incredibly inspiring and exciting. I think it's crazy that we send this generation of children into a school where they sit in front of a teacher where no matter how animated, creative, inventive or drama-filled the teacher is, the children are more likely to feel bored and restless as the teacher tries to impart information to them as part of the lesson. I don't believe that technology or technological tools should supplement or replace really good teaching either. The technology is only as good as the educator who is driving it, as it were. So what will you need to do as an educator to align yourself to this evolutionary process? We are in an information age. 21st century kids no longer need to be fed information. They need to be inspired to think for themselves and seek out what they need to know to explore their thoughts, ideas, and imagination further. 21st century education is not just about technology, it's about a decision to create a classroom that inspires children to learn how to think, to be inspired to invent and create, and ultimately become self-directed, motivated seekers of knowledge. In the 21st century, technology should be the media students use to learn from. The paper age is slowly becoming defunct. E-books are taking over, and technology is the way to communicate. If we don't embrace this as teachers, then I believe we are doing the 21st century generation a disservice. The Common Core standards suggest that they are designed to be robust and relevant to the real world, reflecting the knowledge and skills that our young people need for success in college and careers. Now, while I'm not sure the writers of the standard had technology completely in mind, the truth is they should have. There is not a career or a job that doesn't at least require the smallest amount of technical knowledge, and many careers demand more. You go into a restaurant and you see waiters taking your order using a tablet. You go to a shop and they use tablets now to record what you have purchased. Only just recently, a friend of mine who's a plumber showed me how he uses an iPad and a digital camera to find a block in a drain. Amazing. A shop owner can use mobile technology to do their stock taking, and courier services use the iPhone to deliver and record their deliveries. They can seek directions via GPS and receipt their deliveries as well. So part of the premise of the standards is to recognise that media and technology are part of the 21st century learning process, and that these mediums need to be integrated across the standards. Under the key points in English language and arts, there's a section that addresses media and technology. And it says that just as media and technology are integrated into school and life in the 21st century, skills related to media use both critical analysis and production of media are integrated throughout the standards. Now, I read this to say that we need to integrate technology into our mainstream subject areas of English, math, science, social studies, geography, art. I know a lot of our schools are leaving behind drama and art and creativity, but media and technology is just as important for these areas as well, because the truth is art is also evolving technologically. I know that many teachers may feel intimidated and nervous about the onset of technology, as well as the requirement of the Common Core standards, as they already feel overwhelmed and overworked. Teaching is a tough job, there's no denying it. So whenever there is any change to expectations of teachers, most do feel anxious. The aim of this course is to demonstrate that by using the iPad, you can take your old lessons and recreate them digitally using the iPad applications and recreate your curriculum. It is also easy to align your lessons to the new Common Core standards, as well as use many of the iPad's functions to keep anecdotal records that can form part of your assessment. Don't be scared. There is so much out there that can help you. This course will also give you some foundation from which to work from, because that was my ultimate objective for writing this course and creating it. So, what are some of the things to consider before implementing an iPad program into your classroom or school? I think here are some points that should be included in any school or staff discussion. The iPad saves money, and honestly the students' backs as well. I remember my final year of high school having to carry this huge load of books for every subject area, and the bag being so incredibly heavy. That hasn't gotten any better. However, now with the iPad, we can have all the textbooks on one digital device, and also have all the writing tools, calculators, dictionaries, atlas, encyclopedias, diaries, calendars, all in one device. Very easy to carry. The iPad saves time, as information and computing for learning is always accessible. So no time is lost moving to computers, booting them up, and even having to learn how to use software interfaces. Even 3-year-olds can navigate themselves around the iPad with the touch interface. It's just so easy to use. The iPad empowers students to take responsibility for their own learning by handing over the tools necessary for them to become self-managing learners. The infinite customization possible with each device means education can become personalized and differentiated for each and every student. And this is one of the premises of the Common Core standards, is that we hand the learning back to our students. The apps give the iPad the impetus for education, and the apps are relatively cheap in comparison to software. There are many, many applications, and it's wading through them that can often seem daunting. Don't always go for the cheap options, because most free apps are only a portion of the app or are not very good quality. Remember, you do often get what you pay for. Having said that, there are some apps that are free, like some of the screencasting apps that I will share later, that I think are fantastic. And I still say that Google Earth, which is free, is probably one of the best apps around. It's just an incredible app. How can the Common Core standards be reflected using the technology? It's not just enough to use the iPad. It's important to choose apps that reflect the Common Core standards that you will be teaching in your lessons. You need to have some justification for using the iPad, an application that comes under the umbrella of your teaching philosophy. Hence why I got you to write that rationale at the very beginning of this lecture. Essentially, the Common Core standards should underpin and frame the use of the iPad in your classroom. So what do you need to consider before you deploy iPads into your school and classroom? So how will you use it? I believe that one-to-one iPad use is the only way to go. If you want to call it a flaw, and I don't, the iPad is a very personalized device. It's designed only where you can store your information in files for just one person only. There isn't an area like on your computer where you can have different files allocated to different students, particularly within the apps. That gets quite complicated. So if you've got students all over the school using a different iPad each time, it's going to be really difficult for them to go back and find their work. So to keep everything consistent and in the one place, one-to-one iPad deployment is essential. This also gives the student ownership over their device and over the work that's stored on that iPad, and it's readily available to them. So if they need their English work, they can just go to an English folder. If they need their math work, the same. If they have their favorite apps that's specifically designed for them, then they can go to those. The teacher can then differentiate the learning even more effectively, because you can make sure that the apps that are only relevant for that student go onto that device. What apps will you use and how will you use them? So one of the things to consider, of course, is security issues. In the settings area of the iPad, you can restrict your students from accessing YouTube if you want them to. So they can't download any applications that are M15 plus. I'm not sure what your ratings are in the US, but only G-rated apps if you want to, or PG if you want to. You can turn off the downloading of apps and removing of apps as well. Now, I'm aware there's some very savvy students out there, but I would make my parameters for my students using their iPads very strict. And when I did have my classroom, it was the first month was the hardest, in terms of we had to be very clear with the students about what we wanted them to use, what they could access, and it was immediate removal of the iPad if they disobeyed any of our requests. And very quickly they learned that they had to follow our guidelines or they didn't get to use the iPad. And I really do suggest that that's the way you go to start with. Having a core list of apps, I think, actually helps. And again, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to do this course, because I wanted to give you a foundation of a few apps that you could go into your classroom next week and start using them. There's nothing worse than being handed 50 apps on your iPad and you're surfing around thinking, what on earth am I going to do with these? So at least if you conquer and learn one app at a time or a couple of apps at a time, you're more likely to use them. Make sure you know how the apps work yourself. Don't just hand your student the iPad with the apps on them without having gone through the apps, worked out the features, gone to the settings in the apps, going through step by step. I go through them. It can be a bit arduous sometimes, but I know where the app's going to start and I know where it's going to end. I know if I can change the settings to make it harder or easier if I need to, and I know if that app is going to suit my student. Allocate the iPad for educational use only. One of the decisions I made very, very early on was to only have educational based apps on the iPad. I didn't have any games like Cut the Rope, Angry Birds, Minecraft on the iPad. My premise being that honestly, kids have access to these games on their computer. They have Nintendo, Xbox, Wii, their little PSs, and also many of them have their own iTouch or iPhones as well. So if they came to school and had the iPad that was just educationally based, they were more likely to use it for education. So what activities can you do with the iPad? I don't think the iPad should be a fill-in or a reward, and it kind of breaks my heart when I see it being used like that. I go to lots of schools for training and, I ask the schools what they're using the iPad for, and they say, oh, we let the students use them for 10 minutes at the end of the day. Or if they finish their work, they can use the iPad to play a game. Honestly, I think that is a waste of a $600 or however much they are, depending on which iPad you've purchased, because you are then not using them effectively as an educational tool. The device can't do the work for you or replace you as a teacher. You have to drive its use. Be at the control panel. You decide what apps to use, how to use them, and how to connect them to your overall curriculum and lesson plans. You can create tests and quizzes and worksheets. You can design and present Keynote and PowerPoint presentation, and this is for teachers and for students. You can create lessons using screencasting type apps that can be used over and over and shared with other teachers. You can conduct diagnostics and assessments. You can keep records, attendance and conferencing reports, as well as anecdotal records on individual students. You can edit students' work by correcting and providing feedback. You can share information and books both visually via text and using audio options. Flip teaching via screencasting and augmented reality apps, and we are going to be focusing on those. Students can demonstrate their knowledge, which increases engagement and motivation. The iPad increases student-centered learning and risk-taking in learning. One of the biggest things I saw in my students who had autism was that their confidence increased exponentially, and they were more willing then to take risks in their learning like they never had before. And these kids are particularly conservative. That was an area that just completely shocked me and surprised me, and that I hadn't factored in to my goal setting. The iPad can literally be a personal learning studio by virtue of its size, capabilities and functionality. So, what about the most crucial players, the students? How does using the iPad in the classroom affect them? So each student can be responsible for the care and upkeep of their iPad. Good applications can be individually designed to suit each child's ability level, and I've talked about this before. Essentially, you can build a differentiated curriculum for each student. The use of the iPad is a catalyst for learning and a springboard for further inquiry. Students are able to use thinking skills as part of a thinking curriculum. Children become more student-directed as they navigate their way around the specific applications independently. The iPad's multisensory aspect enhances the learning experience. Students can work at their own pace. They're enthusiastic and motivated to learn, and the thing is, they are learning and they don't even realize it. Students start to become risk takers and gain more confidence, as I mentioned previously. And most importantly, students begin to experience success. And I think this is key to every student achieving success educationally. When they experience success, they gain more confidence. When they gain more confidence, they're willing to take more risks. When they take more risks, they experience more success. And so it becomes a cycle of amazing, successful learning. So as promised, we're about to embark upon the 10 fantastic must-have apps for the classroom. I'm really looking forward to presenting them to you. So let's move on to the next lecture.